Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll be upstanding because I kind of got a toast for you. I think that today has been an absolute triumph of connection. So I hope you'll join me in saying thank you and kudos to the organisers of Innovation Zero on bringing us all together. Will you put your hands together? Come on. It's important. Yeah. I think they've done a brilliant job, and I think anyone who's spread the word using that hashtag of Innovation Zero, you've done a good job, because a lot of people can't be here today. So thank you for being here. Now, we're going to talk about early stage funding. I'd love your questions as we go along. You can do that in the old-fashioned way by raising your hand or hands, or you can do it on the Slido app. So we'll show you how that works with a QR code in due course. Let me tell you who the runners and riders are. You'll probably recognize some of them already. Michael Moore, on the final side, raise your hand, Michael, leads the BVCA, the British Venture Capital Association, the voice of private equity in the UK for over 40 years. Good to see you, Michael. Next to Michael is Beverly Gower-Jones, OBE. You probably already know that she is the managing partner of the Clean Growth Fund. So that's a climate venture capital fund, 100 million plus, particularly into UK-based companies. Good to see you, Beverly. Next to them, who curates and looks after the most interesting, in many people's view, Green Angel Syndicate, Clean Tech Angel Syndicate, well, it's Cam Ross. He is the chief executive of Green Angel Ventures. Now, underpinning them is a syndicate of over 350 angels. Some of you might be in the room. Welcome, Cam. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Next to me, an entrepreneur, Kelly Price, is the founder of Agreed Earth, doing some fascinating work with farmers around the world on regenerative farming, but also, of course, on sustainability. We want to hear much more about it. Welcome, Kelly Price. By no means least, Andrew. Andrew Wordsworth is the co-founder, and he's also the managing partner of Sustainable Ventures. Now, this is a full-service ecosystem. We want to hear more about what that means, but it means money, it means space, and more. Please welcome them all with your round of applause. Thank you. Now, okay, fingers on buzzers. If this panel was 2 minutes long, and the big question to us all today was, how do we get more money into better entrepreneurial teams to solve these problems quicker, and you only had 30 seconds today, what would you say, Beverly?
I'd say we need to shout about our successes in the UK much, much more than we do. Funding seeks success, and so if we can show the great exits that we've already delivered from the UK ecosystem, then much more money is going to flood in, because people are going to see that they can make the returns that they're looking for.
Okay, shout about our successes louder and more often. Got it. Cam, your answer.
I think that established funding exists for really early stage businesses and really late stage businesses, and there's quite a big gap in the middle. And I think to really accelerate those technologies and processes that are going to underpin our tackling of the climate change issue is really vital. So I'm talking about 3 million to 15 million investment.
So that gap, and we'll pick into that more. Thank you, Cam. Michael.
We actually, scared myself there. We need more UK institutional capital available overall. The pot available for investment is too small in terms of the UK sourcing of it. We need that to change. Glad the Prime Minister was here earlier. Hope he's listening to everybody's views on that. And we need the right investment environment to incentivise the deployment of that capital, not least in this space.
Right, so more institutional funding. Unlock. Bring down those dams. Right. Kelly. Yeah. Are you catching Kelly there? Borrow this.
Thank you. Policy, because policy changes are the tailwinds that drive the need for corporate innovation, which is what drives the money into startups like ourselves.
So at this point, our colleagues at the Treasury have picked up their pens. They're poised. An area of policy which you would like them to have a quick look at. Kelly.
The carbon footprint of nitrogen.
Very interesting. Keep that. I'll be on this. Thank you, Andrew.
I think one of the things is recognising this is a long-term problem. So, getting to net zero is not something we'll do tomorrow, but recognising that, particularly in institutions, that if you're taking money off a 25-year-old and putting it into pension, then you need to be investing so that you get returns in that longer time period. And the same can be said for government, that's sort of moving away from that sort of short-term electoral cycle to realising that this is going to be a long-term transition.
Okay, so some patience. Now, I want to, would you raise your hand in our sort of finance forum if you are an investor yourself? Hands up. Hands up, we'll be coming to you later. Very good. All right, and hands up if you're currently seeking investment. Just doing a bit of matchmaking here, really, aren't I? Okay, that's it. That's coffee break sorted. We need to know more about who's funding what. Cam, tell us what you're funding, what your angels are funding. We want to know what those sweet spots are, please.
Well, you very kindly mentioned that Green Angel Ventures has underpinning it a 350-person high net worth individual angel syndicate, and we fund companies that have at scale a real demonstrable impact on climate change. And we also run a couple of funds of our own as well, which top up that members' money with government funding and also with other private money.
Your angels are UK based or global?
The angels come from everywhere. Our investments are in the UK.
Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Why? On
Why?
the UK destination?
Because of brilliant SEIS, NES, EIS tax breaks.
Okay, very honest
Which really
answer.
genuinely does incentivize people to put money into UK companies.
Okay, back to policy tailwinds. Okay, very helpful. Okay, and average deal size, mean or median of those angels in terms of the funding?
So when we invest into a company these days, we're putting in somewhere between 300,000 as a first round and about 1.5 million in terms of follow-on.
Yeah, helpful. Thank you. Beverly, what are you funding? Remind us.
So the Clean Growth Fund's £100 million venture capital fund. We invest in seed and Series A companies. Our initial check size is £0.5 to £3 million, and those companies need to be UK based. Very critically, I look at things in terms of return on capital, obviously, but return on carbon. And what do I mean by return on carbon? Those companies need to demonstrate significant greenhouse gas emission reduction potential over the 5 and 10 year kind of lifetimes of their business plans.
Okay, that's really clear. Thank you. Andrew, remind us how it comes together.
Yeah, so from our we're at pre-seed stage. So I will.
Maybe Kelly will share.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly.
So our typical ticket size is between 150 and 200,000, but we're also part of the Innovate UK Investor Partnership, which you may have been brought. So they will almost match that with grant funding.
Yeah,
So
all right. Thank you, Andrew. So Kelly, remind us about Agreed, but also, if you don't mind, how you've funded yourself so far.
Sure. We are helping decarbonize the food system. Agriculture is the source of 1/4 of the world's greenhouse gases, and we need to decarbonize. And it's really difficult with the food system. But one place that we can push the lever on is synthetic nitrogen fertilizer made from methane, huge carbon footprint of production and application, releases nitrous oxide 300 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. And there's no accounting for it right now. It's a black box. So we're building a satellite model to remote sense and account for it to help supply chains push down on those emissions. We're helping reduce emissions and the carbon footprint of our food.
Yeah. And what does that mean in practice for the farmer on the ground, for example?
Well, for the farmer, right now, they're using nitrogen as an insurance policy.
Yeah.
It's their crop insurance. They chuck it on the field to ensure they have the maximum yield, but 50% of it is lost to the air and to the water as nitrate.
Yeah, okay, so this is a massive. How have you funded it so far? Who have you worked?
Yeah, thank you very much. We got our start with Carbon 13, which is a venture builder for the climate crisis. And then we found impact investors that were thesis aligned on the sustainable food system. And so they came in for a pre-seed round. We found that aligned investors is the most powerful thing because they form a team on your behalf.
Yeah, got it. Now, any grant funding in the mix?
Yes, I'm happy to say we've got an Innovate UK grant on nitrogen use efficiency. We also got a grant from the European Space Agency to help build out our model.
No, congrats. Look at more of those sources in a moment. Now then, Michael Moore, if I can go to our friends at Bowhurst, telling us that there were a record number of clean tech deals in 2022, one of the top verticals in the UK market. Our audience doesn't need reminding of that. Last year, says Bowhurst, there were a total of 502 fundraisings held by clean techs, 17% up on the previous year. So according to their reckoning, 35% of the funders on their platform have at least one clean tech company in their portfolio. So before we go back digging, some reflections on this as a space. It's absolutely buzzing, but what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting there is self-evident to this group of people and anywhere you might be. At the moment in the City of London, the net zero recovery summit is underway. The governor of the Bank of England was there earlier today talking about the need to make sure we fund the transition, not just here in the UK, but internationally. It's very exciting that clean tech is actually driving so much of the VC activity here in the UK. And 2022 was a difficult year. This was a year where some of the post-pandemic reality checks kicked in for a number of people. What was encouraging was that clean tech continued to increase in terms of the number of deals, which bucked the trend in other areas of the startup and scale-up economy. So that's one thing that is particularly encouraging. Yeah. And actually, where it's got to, it is only now sitting behind fintech and AI in terms of its overall importance. So nobody here needs reminded, but there's a wave here to be ridden, so long as we get the capital and all the other things that people want.
And in terms of other people joining the party, to be flippant for a second, you've got 2/3 of those funds who don't have a clean tech in their portfolio. What are they saying to themselves?
Well, depends on what their mandate is and where they have been raising their money, what's going on for that. I think that there's only one direction in which this goes, and a little bit like, wouldn't it be great to get to the point where every deal was a clean tech deal? Because frankly, if we're going to decarbonize, if we're going to do the transition, we need to have everybody with this mindset. It will be segmented along lots of different ways, but the solutions to climate change and the adapting of the existing economy to climate change require the brilliance of the people in this room.
Thank you. Right now, forgive me, everyone. We're going to go quite rapidly through a series of big questions here. Wish we had an hour and a half. We don't. Gaps in the funding. Where are the gaps, Beverly?
So I set up the Clean Growth Fund because I identified a gap in that first-of-a-kind demonstrator piece. So it's where the friends and family money can't reach to because the check size is too big, and yet the general venture capital firms aren't ready because the companies are not revenue generating. And so therefore you have to do quite a lot of due diligence in terms of that product market fit. If a company is revenue generating, someone's bought it. So you can tick that box. Whereas, if you look at that technology readiness level commercialization journey, and you look at the engineering risk, right? So technology risk, engineering risk, and then market risk. And I tried to define engineering risk and invest in that sweet spot.
So that's an argument that says you've filled a gap. Where do the gaps remain today?
So there's been some recent work done by Clean Tech for the UK, which is an organisation that I was a founder member of, which is looking at the growth stage gaps and looking at, kind of beyond Series B, that when you need 20 million, 50 million to build a pilot, a commercial-sized structure.
Yep.
How do you do that?
Interesting. Just met Power Roll out in the expo. No interest in them financially, but exactly what they're asking themselves. Andrew, where's the gap?
So when we set up our pre-seed fund, we recognised there was a gap at an even earlier stage. So companies that have maybe taken some friends and family money, but obviously not everybody's got sufficiently rich friends and family to get them there, but sort of pre-revenue. So we're probably reasonably unique in that we will take pre-revenue risk. We're an SEIS, predominantly a SEIS fund, and therefore the tax breaks give us a big break to the investors on that side of things. But we recognise that what we do is we can add value to take them to that next stage where they've got traction. Which, if anybody's been to an angel investor and they pitch, who's bought this project?
Right. Okay. But nevertheless, if the PM comes down and says, "Look, we all sorted, we've all got it," you go, "Yeah, we've sorted it." But where's the urgency? Where do we have to shine the light?
Yeah. So again, then I say there's then a further funding gap. We see our portfolio companies exactly what Beverly's talked about. That sort of next stage, that people will write £1 million check. Okay. So there's multiple valleys of death.
So I'm hearing the early stage, and that's where the angels might come in. Cam, will come to you now, but also around that £1 million, but then further down the line, multiple gaps. Cam, help us make sense of it.
Thanks for mentioning Power Roll, a Green Angel Syndicate portfolio company. Yeah, I mean, you might hear a similar answer to all of the funders on this panel, and it probably stems from this generalization. No matter how much the three of our entities can actually do in terms of funding, it is absolutely nowhere enough. So in order to meet our climate obligations over the next 5 years, over the next 6 years, over the next decade, 3, 5, 8, 10 times the amount of money has to go in at every level. Now, really early stage is being tackled, medium stage is being tackled. I agree with Beverly that there's substantial gaps in the sort of 30 to 50 million pound. I mentioned 15 to 3 to 15 earlier. Just you can put a pin in any of those ranges and require that an order of magnitude more goes in over the next few years.
Understood. Now, Kelly, I'm going to put you on the spot here because investors in the room saying, how do we work together to better support the entrepreneurs of Britain and beyond? What would be on your request list for that, based on your personal experience? What didn't they do enough of?
I wouldn't say that investors for us haven't done enough of anything. We've been very, very lucky. But I'm gonna give you a bonus answer.
Go on.
I'm gonna go back to the policy tailwinds and kind of to Cam's point. I'd love to see, honestly, I'd love to see a price on carbon universal right now. In absence of that, why don't we use some carrots? Why don't we give maybe a further tax break based on the carbon reduction potential of investments? Since SEIS and EIS are such a driver, as we've seen. So that's the first thing.
Yep.
The second thing for the investors, I think that finding investors who are mission aligned, who can deal flow, share DD, that's huge efficiencies. Like, why do they have to each go do it separately if they're
Yep.
going to look to go in together? And that kind of group movement is very powerful and it helps them move faster.
So shared due diligence. Give us a glimpse to reassure us this is happening in practice. Bring it to life for us, anyone? I'm looking for offers on that. Shared due diligence stands to reason, Cam. It's happening.
Yeah, and each of us here on the panel will say that we do that on occasion.
On occasion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a big difference whether you're leading a deal or whether you're following. And following, you tend to use the existing infrastructure that's been put in place, the data rooms, those sorts of things. We're not crazy. We want to get these things done quickly.
Okay. So now we need your secrets. By the way, looking for your questions. So if you've got a question in the room or we can put it into Slido as well, I'd like to know what those are, please. What's your secret to picking winners then, Beverly?
I think it's something that takes place over time. So it's always good to start building a relationship sooner rather than later. You know, the time when you need the money is not the time to start contacting investors. Yeah.
Thank you.
Try and
Forgive
do
me, I'm
that
going to go
upfront.
pithy on this.
Sure.
Andrew, come in.
Yeah, I'd say I think Kelly mentioned it. It's having investors who understand the sector, who've been around. I mean, I've been in the sector for 20 years now, which makes me feel old every time I say that. But I think this panel, we all work together. We've all got co-investments, and key, talk about what we see as an ecosystem. It's that journey and working with companies all the way from the earliest stages and supporting them through. So no individual investor has funds at all different levels. But it's basically it's providing that access and those referrals and that funding journey is really important.
Isn't the flip side of that the argument that says bring in the guy or the woman who funded Spotify, who funded Airbnb, because it's their fresh eyes and vision that will really shake things up?
Yeah, it probably segues into, so somebody's buying Spotify, then a kind of classic climate tech software business, maybe exactly the right side of things, but somebody who's doing refrigerated transport like SunSwap, I don't think they can add an awful lot of value.
Interesting. Okay. Well, of course, Daniel Waterhouse at Balderton has crossed that chasm, so to speak. Why don't we get your tip, Cam?
On how to spot winners? Yeah, I think it's just you'll hear from a lot of people that it's about the people and the teams in those businesses, and it really is. But it has to be underpinned by good ideas. And for all of us here, the belief that at scale, when this company is operating in 3, 4, 5 years' time, that there will be a substantial impact on carbon from that company.
Right. Really helpful. Really helpful. Now, Michael, I want more from you on the bigger picture, but I'm hungry for questions. So who's got a zinger? I see you there. Thank you. And I see that offer there as well. That's very convenient. Have we got a roving or roaming mic? If not, I'm going to come on down. Thanks, Kelly. Feel free to say who you are, where you're from, and you don't have to. There you go. Team, is that all right? Or would you rather seek them out? All right, I'll go down there. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I have a startup which scales biomaterials for the fashion industry from agricultural waste, which means huge carbon savings. We are finding great appetite at the angel level to support us, which is really exciting. The challenge comes where we speak to VC, and it seems that the VC appetite for risk around those kind of deep tech, like hardware type things that we're doing compared with software, um, is lacking, and it makes it really hard for us, even though our predictions financially are to be 10x. Actually, as soon as VC looks at what we're doing and says, "Oh, you're making materials," there seems to be like a real step back in that. And I wonder whether you think VC is going to be able to transition to be able to support.
All right, good question. Good, very good question. I want to hear what your neighbour's got to say in a second. Back to you. What is the most credible objection that you've heard about the business from the VCs where you think you got a point?
That they think it's a 5x company, not a 10x company.
Interesting. Very good. Let's hear from your neighbour, and then perhaps we'll pick up on these. Forgive me, is it hardware as well? Is it hardware?
Yeah.
Mixture. Oh, wait.
Very similar question. I'm Simon Davis. I run Ox Delivers, which is a EV company doing transport in Africa and emerging markets. And I guess my question is similar. We're doing hardware and software. So my view is if you just do software, you're not going to do anything about climate. CO2 is a hardware problem, right? You physically have to do something. But when you do that, you want to break up some of the industry paradigms. Like today, car makers make cars, dealers sell cars, and operators operate cars. Actually, the future looks like a different breakup. But investors look at that and go, well, that's a bit complicated.
So crystallise the question. How do we help you most?
How do you get investors to look differently at a model? And because they want to see everything in a grid, right? And this is how the industry breaks up.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm looking for offers on that second question in particular. How do you get investors to... Here you go, sold to Camros.
Well, firstly, I want to say thank you to both of you for doing what you're doing, because the world needs 5,000 lots of you. So thank you very much. I think our approach, and this might cover both of your questions, when we're looking at our angel syndicate, is we only invest in areas that we really understand. So we have 350 specialist members with really expert backgrounds and in the areas in which we invest. And if we don't understand the area in which you come to us, we'll just politely say no, because we don't think we can add the value there. So to unpick your second question, the way we'll set your matrix out, or your grid of how we look at those things, is we will ask 3 or 4 of our specialist members in our network to take a really hard look at the deep technology, because that's the areas they work in. And if we think there's value there, then we'll progress. Don't invest in the areas that we don't understand.
Can I make a playful observation? That suggests a slightly odd attitude to education, to self-education. To say, we don't understand this, no thank you. Isn't it your responsibility, Cam, to educate your angels?
You could put it like that. You could also, I don't know why this isn't working. You could say that, but I think the reality is that as we've been growing our angel syndicate, by 50 members a year, 100 members a year, we're picking up those skills, and people are coming in, and we are learning all the time through that.
Will anyone come back briefly on this hardware-software point? Michael?
I think the depressing reality is that's going to exist all the way through the capital spectrum as people scale. We're seeing it in the different world of life sciences as they try to capture in the UK some of the great businesses that have done startup, done a bit of scale up, and want to keep them here rather than flying to the US, because there's deep-seated knowledge. This problem corrects itself over time because the expertise, the knowledge begins to get better shared. But to Cam's point, actually the secret of angel investing, or some of the VCs that we have in our membership, is actually the model brings in the people who know about the finance and the business model, but they bring in the operating partners who say, ensure this idea flies. And the connections between our universities, the people who have nothing to do with VC or private equity or anything else, but have deep experience in these industries, it's getting all of those people in the same room and helping the people who ultimately the investment decision to make that decision is the key. So I'm afraid a hellish answer, a bit of patience and continuing education of all of us.
All right, thank you, Michael. Now, looking for more questions. I see you at the back, sir, and I see an offer over there. Thank you. I don't know. Yeah, we've got mics. That's generous. Thank you. Feel free to say who you are. You don't have to.
Hi, my name's Rory, and I'm a student and a social entrepreneur. And my question is, what stage of setting up a business would you say that most people come to the angel investors at?
What stage of setting up a business? So do you mean in terms of
how far in?
how far? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Very good. And at the risk of driving everyone nuts. Why don't we hear what the guest in the far corner's got as well? No more mics. There you go. We've used all the mics. That's all right. I used to work for Jeremy Kyle.
Does it work? No, it's not. It's not. Hi, my name is Achim Hoffmann. I'm an early stage climate tech founder. Why should I stay in the UK? We've got the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, and Europe is also putting up loads of funding. What's happening in the UK?
What's your name, sir? Ari. Who will give Ari a warm welcome to stay in the UK? Yes, I will lead that charge. Please stay. Right, it's a serious question, though, isn't it, Michael?
It is, and interestingly, kind of reinforcing the point you're making. Whenever the Green Finance Strategy was published a few weeks ago, it identifies that we need 50 to 60 billion a year just to deal with the financing that's going on there. We were slightly disappointed at the lack of specifics, but part of the issue is a recognition of the issues and the problem, and I think there's no question, whether it's the Conservatives in government, Labour hoping to be the government, that both sides of Parliament see what's happening with the Inflation Reduction Act, they see the European Union response, and are now having to say, right, what is that incentivization? It goes back to my point originally. We need a bigger pool of capital, but we then actually need to say, why would I do it here rather than somewhere else? I actually think part of the answer to your question is the talent, the ideas, and what can be scaled in the UK is probably unique, or at least gives you a damn good cluster to start with. Our job is to persuade the politicians from all parties that they've got to provide the policy environment that makes you feel welcomed and wish to stay for a long time.
Okay, now, will anyone else give me something? I was talking with Roland Harwood yesterday about the supercluster across Europe for clean tech. Will anyone else give us another UK edge for our global guests to bear in mind? Andrew, have you got something, or Cam? Because I want more from Kelly. Andrew.
Yeah. So talk about sort of kind of European supercluster. So we're just completing our workspace in Old County Hall, which will have over 1,000 people working there, about 120 companies, exclusively tackling climate change. So that's going to be Europe's largest cluster.
And where's that? In London, you say?
That's in London. So that's in SE1. So
and you're Manchester as well, Mumbai, I think?
So yeah, we'll move to Manchester as well. So we're replicating that ecosystem.
Yeah.
So what we do, you talk about ecosystem builder. So we do have an investment fund, but money is part of the problem.
Yeah.
But what we do is we talk about sort of we engage with companies from beer mats all the way through to exits, and whatever you need as a startup, whatever support you need, we will find the appropriate side of things. But most importantly, bringing you into that wider community.
Yeah.
So you're with your peers, and a lot of what we get is peer-to-peer support. So if you're doing, you're tackling sustainable fashion, we've got sustainable fashion people in our kind of 450.
Yeah.
If you're looking at other things, we can put you in touch with people who are in a similar field.
Yeah.
But the great thing about the sector is, because everybody's mission-driven to tackle climate change, there's a lot more collaboration than there would be in fintech or investech.
Interesting.
So I think that's a really
good to hear.
Feature.
Okay. Kelly, I want to know that we've given enough useful feedback to our guests, particularly at the front here. If you wouldn't mind building on what Andrew's been saying there. They're still on this journey.
Actually, I'd like to build on a lot of points that have been made. I'm going to kind of give you another bonus synthetic answer here. Quickly. Data is key to decarbonization, so software definitely has a key role to play. But separately, this is going to touch on 10x, I'm sorry, what is your name? Sarah. I'm really glad you raised that point. We talked about the gaps, the holes, the valleys. I think let's look at 10x. Is that realistic for a company that you're asking to innovate on tech, maybe even business model in a 3 to 5 year span? I think it's actually crazy, and they have their hands tied behind their backs because there's no price in carbon, so it's more profitable to actually wreck the planet than try to save it. There's not value being put on that benefit. So we're asking these companies to be fast, amazing, innovative, super profitable, and save the planet at the same time. It's a tall order. I'd argue we need two things. First, we need more patient capital that's not looking for 10x in 3 to 5 years. Maybe down the line, sure, when you're in all the supply chains. But 3 to 5 years, please. Second, a way we could really value what the company is bringing in that is not just the monetary return, but also the decarbonization return. Yep. Let's put a value on that and add that into the investment equation. I think that is sorely needed.
Yeah, helpful. I've got lots more we could go on that. Cam, I want to feel we've given our guest, by the speaker, something on stages for engaging with angels.
Yeah. So I'll start this and then I'll let Andrew just finish because he'll have a really good take on it as well. So in terms of our typical investments, it would be a company that was formed, at least two people, that there was some chance in the next 6 months of getting that first customer and that first revenue stream. But Andrew will absolutely have an earlier mindset on that. Andrew?
Yeah, so we will probably go even before. So basically, Green Angel Syndicate, it's not a coincidence that a lot of the investments we make, the next stage is Green Angel Syndicate. And so what we do is because we have a much more hands-on intensive support, that we basically de-risk them to a point where, an angel investor can feel much more comfortable about the security of that return. And so far, so good. I think it's worked quite well. We've got at least one exit and one hopefully on the way. So
excellent. Congrats. Okay, thank you, Anthony, coming in on Slido. Policy tailwinds are mentioned. Is the truth that business needs to lead the way and show government where policy is needed? Example, in public-private collaboration. Very good point. And by the way, Beverly, aren't the best people to solve these problems the big corporates?
I think it does. I think what we have to realise that in the normal speed of commercialising technology, take your iPhone for example, it's a 30-year journey. What we're trying to do with climate change for the very first time is really speed that and accelerate that through the piece. And these two entrepreneurs here, their challenges are business model changes. Right, that's the real issue, because when you change a business model, you change the way value is created, but importantly, you change the way that the value is shared. And so you don't just have to, develop the technology. What you have to do is develop the supply chain, the new supply chain, and you have to show where that value is going to be distributed to. And so the current incumbents who are going to lose out, right, because of that change, are not going to be very happy about moving, and the investors who are potentially going to invest are going to be really concerned that it's actually all going to work and be joined up, right? And both those, so I think that's the thing you really have to focus on in your pitches. So
they're
the
helpful.
public,
Thank you, Beverly. Michael, just a glimpse. We've got a corporate venturing panel separately, but presumably in many cases, these large corporates and the investors are one in the same.
Yeah, and we've got quite a lot of corporate venture partners who are members of the BVCA, and I think it takes the whole range of investors with different mindsets. A big corporate may have a much more sophisticated, mature view of what is investable and what will scale, and have channels to put the successful investments out into markets that people could only dream of, but they won't necessarily have the scrappiness, the disruptive mentality that will actually undermine their own business model. Why would they? So outsiders are needed.
Okay, now we've got 10 minutes remaining, so we will have room for more questions. Please keep them coming on Slido if you want to scan the QR code, or good old-fashioned in person. Question for the panel. A woefully small, my word, amount of venture capital goes into female-founded and led businesses. How do we shift the needle on that in a meaningful way? And here, I'm not looking for sound bites, I'm looking for practical steps. Who will start us off?
As the middle-aged bloke at this end of the panel, let me lead with the chin. The other middle-aged blokes are available on the panel, as you're pointing out. Look, I, as the Chief Executive of the BVCA, have recently joined the Rose Review Board, which is the board that is led by Alison Rose of NatWest, which is absolutely laser focused on how this can be done, because frankly, not enough is done. We did a survey recently with Level 20, which promotes the role of women as senior investment professionals in the industry. I'm embarrassed to say that even though things are improving, there's still only 12% of senior investment professionals in the industry who are women. So we need to do a lot of that. Adi, who's just crept in at the side here, is part of that Rose Review Board as well. And whether it's the VC investing guidelines that she and others are working on, it's a whole range of areas. And we had an ESG conference for our industry yesterday where we were absolutely nailing this need to make sure that women are part of the conversation and that we help to change what are cultural and other structural barriers that exist.
Okay, excellent, Michael. Who will give us something even blunter, even pithier I'm looking for any offers here. I see you, I see you, Beverly. Andrew, then Beverly.
I think if you're an investor, the easiest way to increase the diversity in your portfolio is to invest in more female founders. Sounds obvious, but if you just do that, and that in itself, people, I think if you're starting a business such as the guy who asked the question earlier, look for a female founder, because all the evidence says that diverse companies outperform.
That is the shocking reality. Why would you lock yourself out of 50%?
100%. Now then.
The talent pool and therefore the opportunity.
Okay, Beverly.
All right, so the Clean Growth Fund is over 50% female in terms of staff, and it's not by accident. So, because the talent pool is smaller, you have to look harder. So you have to set your recruitment firm's targets. I want a 50% females on my shortlist, and I won't settle for anything less. So go away until you've produced me 50% females that match the criteria. That's really key.
Okay.
And then on the boards, we work with, Included and the Newton Venture Program.
Right, Included.vc.
Yeah, women on boards, right? And we make sure that we have females on all our boards. And then, we obviously look for really hard for female founders. They don't get any dispensation, by the way. It's absolutely critical that that it's the right person for the job. There's no kind of discount because you happen to be from any diverse background, right? But the key successful, bright, all diversity from all walks of life are out there. You just have to put the effort into finding them.
So forgive me for asking, what would happen, Beverly, if you said a percentage of our funding is going to go into female-led companies?
I would never do that.
Why would you never do that?
Because when I worked for Shell for 20 years, and Shell had this discriminatory policy that said, eventually women will be promoted above men. So everybody in the organization decided that I was just being promoted because of what I was rather than what I did. And it was a disaster, and I left. Right? Because you want to be recognized for who you are, the quality of what you do, and your abilities, not because of how you were born, and I think that's really fundamental, and it's a two-way street, right? It's up to the female founders as well.
Well, give me some advice then, because we took a view when I started the Clean and Cool mission that we didn't care if the founder of a business was a man or a woman, and guess what? We would show up with 19 blokes, and it was an embarrassment looking back, and I'm ashamed of the choices we made. And I think on balance, we could have made some tougher decisions to say there are arguments against this, but damn it, a chunk of this is going to go into women-led businesses. Kelly.
Am I allowed to slide into a panel I'm not on? I've just stepped out of another one. Hi, thank you. 2 reasons you can't do what you just said. And it's outrageous you ask it to the only woman in the panel as well. But, yeah, no, but you pinned her. That's me fighting. 2 reasons. Number one of the best companies we've ever backed, highest ROI, highest EV growth, highest capital in, was female run when we were there. She left her company because she had other things to do. Is that in my portfolio or not in my portfolio? So there's actually just a pragmatic point here. But the second is exactly what Beverly said, which is we do not back female-led or diverse-backed founded companies. We back the best companies we possibly can, and we happen to overscore massively. And it happened that 90% of the capital we invested last year was into female companies. I don't want a single one of those companies to think they were the best of the female companies we found. They were the best of the companies we could find. And if I can come back while I'm being punchy, to your first question, what can be done? I mean, hands up here if you are an investor or buy side at all. Okay, there's a few. Number one, go to www.investment diversity guidelines. It is an open source document where we talk to all the investors, institutional, every level, of what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you. And then we spoke to founders who were diverse, who've raised more than 10 or 50 million, or have grown ROI or IRR over 40%, or whatever it is. And we said to them, what works, what doesn't. That's a great starting point.
Thank you very much, Ali Pinkster. Kelly, please.
Thank you. I think that I can add to this because I'd really very much take those points, and I think that it's also harder to find female founders. We've just talked about how more diverse companies are more successful. There's a lot more female founders also in the social impact and climate space, it turns out. So that's the good news. So what I would say is then just make sure that you're really actively pipelining them, because then you're just benefiting yourself and putting a whole lot more in front of you. And so many great people will automatically show up. I think there's a social dimension that doesn't really get talked about. We talked about most VCs and investors are men. There's social networks. Men know men. You know, they're friends. And there's also a social lens where I think it's harder for women to kind of stand up there and be boastful because of the societal pressures that are placed on us and how it can look negative. And so we almost have to listen to women with a slightly different ear so that we can really hear that potential and not expect them to be completely boasting. I know I myself am always worried that I might, sound like the next Elizabeth Holmes if I, sell the vision too far. Yes. So I think that that's an element as well.
Understood. Now, forgive me, Kelly. We're going to go into the sort of final today. So rather than take a final question, our panel, thank you, have been cogitating over what's been said, and I will give you a final word each, if that's all right. Thank you for your... by the way, can we have a round of applause for the whole panel so far? Thank you very much indeed. Cam, your thought, particularly knowing we've got so many investors in the room, but also the entrepreneurs alongside them, a final reflection.
I think for me, I'll just repeat what I said to these two entrepreneurs down here. Thank you for doing what you're doing, everybody in this ecosystem. So whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're funding it, we need much, much more of all of us working together if we're to fight the biggest problem that humankind has brought upon itself.
100%. Thank you. Beverly.
Yeah, I think to successfully accelerate, because time is what we need to do 5 times faster this decade than we did in the last 2. And so how do we do that? It's about bringing together, our policymakers, our investors, our entrepreneurs, and our professional services organisations, which is the reason we should stay in the UK, to really kind of accelerate this thing and get it moving. And that's going to be the biggest win for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Beverly. Andrew.
Yeah, I'd probably add to what Cam's saying. I mean, as an exited entrepreneur myself, I know how hard it is. And what I say is do get involved through our organisation, through other organisations. There's support out there. There's people who have been there before, and therefore don't feel you're doing it on your own. That's why we get out of bed in the morning.
I'd love to see the UK be a leader in bringing in valuation of the carbon reduction impact of a startup and that investment into the investment equation.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you, Kelly. Michael, a final thought.
I'll finish where I started, if I may. We want the capital, we want the policy environment that keeps people here in the UK to invest in this sector and others.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. 2 thoughts. Firstly, as we segue out of this session, why not take the chance to meet our neighbours? I know we're just going to have maybe a micro break. If there is a 2-minute break, we'll see. But secondly, just a huge thank you to you for being here, but also to our panel for sharing so openly, to Michael, to Beverly, to Cam, to Kelly, and of course to Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.